In today's lesson, we'll start by covering the key points of each technique within the basic framework of table tennis. First, let's begin with the forehand drive. The first key point for the forehand drive is to let your body lead your arm, even if it's just a little. Many players have a good drive but a poor loop because they don't use their body for the drive, which makes their looping motion disconnected. So in the beginning, focus on feeling the body lead the backswing and the forward swing. Have your practice partner feed you the ball a bit slower so you can complete the full motion. The second key point is learning to drive and snap your forearm. This is very important. Most amateur players either push the ball or just snap their forearms prematurely. You need to learn to use your forearm and upper arm to drive into the ball and snap through. Find that drive and snap feeling. If you learn to drive and snap, your forehand framework will be solid. Your arm meets the ball, drives forward on contact, and then finishes with a controlled upward motion. That's the second point. Third, within the forehand framework, you must learn to truly control your backswing and the end of your stroke. The forehand drive is like practicing calligraphy, you can't rush it. You have to be deliberate, stroke by stroke. So, your backswing should be at your side, and you should finish between your eyebrows. Maintain this consistent motion. You need to practice until you can maintain this fixed motion whether you're hitting softly, with power, or while moving your feet. Once you reach this level, with a deliberate backswing and follow through every time, your forehand drive will be fundamentally stable. This is the framework for the forehand drive. Now let's cover 3 key points for the backhand. The first point for the backhand drive is that your wrist must be cocked back and stay firm. Because only by keeping it cocked and firm can you drive into the ball effectively. If your wrist isn't locked back, the ball will be unstable, leading to many unforced errors. So, the first key point is to keep your wrist cocked and firm from the backswing through contact. It will feel very awkward at first, but once it becomes a habit, your backhand will be capable of power, rips, and other variations. So, for the first point, you must ensure your wrist is cocked back. The second point is to learn to isolate your forearm from your upper arm. Many players make mistakes looping backspin because they push with their arm as one unit, resulting in insufficient friction. You must isolate your forearm from your upper arm to make your backhand feel completely effortless. So, when practicing the backhand drive, you need a drive and follow through motion, similar to the forehand, instead of just pushing or hitting. The third key point for the backhand is to learn external rotation, meaning rotating your forearm outwards. Many players can't generate power because their backhand is just a forward pushing motion. This is because many amateurs were taught by old-school, penhold grip coaches, and the penhold backhand is mainly a forward block, so the concept of external rotation is missing. The difference in power between just pushing forward and using external rotation is night and day. Why do you struggle to generate power against backspin on your backhand? Because you are just pushing forward, while I use external rotation. So you must have that feeling of flicking your forearm, like throwing a frisbee. This motion is like a general drawing his sword. If you don't draw the sword fully, you'll be defeated. So, imagine it's a sword. You must point it all the way out to have that sharp, commanding feel of a general drawing his sword. Many people mistake external rotation for a sideways wiping motion, but wiping and forearm rotation are two different concepts. Cock your wrist, keep your upper and lower arms separated, and drive forward with forearm rotation. Master these 3 points, and your backhand will be dominant. For the forehand loop against topspin, remember 3 key points. First, you must drop your forearm. Many players who have practiced the forehand drive for a long time tend to have too high a backswing when they try to loop. In a match, many topspin balls have impure spin. They might be pushed backspin, blocked balls, or balls from pips out rubbers, short, medium, long, which are always heavy. So, you must learn to drop your forearm from a level position. Drop your forearm, and your loop will become much more stable. In any looping system, if you want to loop well, your paddle must be lower than the ball. This means you meet and intercept the ball during your upward swing, which is different from hitting it from back to front. Even against topspin, you must drop down. Because only by dropping down can you create a more stable arc and generate spin on your loop. So, you must drop the forearm. But since it's against topspin, you don't need to lower your center of gravity as much. It's mainly the arm and shoulder. Drop the forearm to create the looping trajectory. The second key point is you must learn the outside arc. A drive is a straight drive and snap. A loop is when you snap your forearm along an outside arc. Players who tend to side spin the ball often have very stable loops because they use a pure outside arc. They loop much better than those with a straight swing path. However, I don't recommend hooking the ball with major side spin. An outside arc means your backswing is close to your body, contact is to the side of your body, and from there you draw an arc forward and upward. Many players have a straight back-to-front swing or a sideways wiping motion, so they never develop this outside arc. Remember the phrase, start close, finish far. If you loop with this principle in mind, you will definitely succeed. The third point, crucial for looping, is learning to meet the ball. Most amateurs, trying to generate power, finish their loop immediately or sideways after contact. The essence of the loop is driving from inside your body's frame towards the front. The speed of your upward finish isn't the most important thing. What's crucial is how you get your hand out to drive the ball forward. This is the key. Right now, we generally have too much upward and leftward motion, for right-handers. So, everyone must learn to drive forward close to the body, and then finish inwards and upwards. Once you learn to drive through the loop, you can hit those beautiful shots you see on TV. Your direction of force determines the quality of your topspin. Since adding more spin is difficult, driving your force forward is key. Let's summarize the key points for the forehand loop. Drop the forearm. Second, use an outside arc swing path. Third, direct your power forward to make solid contact with the ball. Then think about snapping your forearm. The first key point for the backhand rip is cocking your wrist inward. This is also key for the drive. Ripping the ball with a stiff, straight wrist generates far less threat than executing the shot with a properly cocked wrist. So, the first key point for the rip is to cock your wrist and forearm inward. The angle isn't sideways, but rather pointing towards your chest, then you drive out. This will give you a high-quality ball. The second key point, since the backhand motion is smaller than the forehand's large body movement, the key to the backhand rip is finding that instantaneous snap at contact. You have to develop that hand power. The friction in a backhand rip is actually a very subtle feeling at the moment of contact. So the key is, how can you grip the ball for an instant and then send it out? So, how do you grip the ball? First, relax your fingers. Then, accelerate forward while squeezing with your fingers. That's how you get that grip. With this action and power, getting the ball on the table is very simple. Without it, you'll lose control of the arc whenever you try to power up your backhand rip. So, the second key point for the backhand rip is the finger and grip power at impact. Third, the biggest difference between a backhand rip and a backhand drive is that the rip has an outside arc. You can hit a backhand drive with a straight motion. But if you do that for a rip, it can't be called a rip. The backhand rip requires the paddle head to travel in an outside arc. For any technique involving friction, the outside arc is paramount. So, when you first practice the backhand rip, deliberately make your paddle head trace an outside arc. If it moves straight back and forth, you'll never rip well. There is always an outside arc, and this arc is mainly created by rotating the paddle head. To summarize the backhand rip, first, cock your wrist and forearm inward. This is crucial for storing energy. Second, at contact, use a relax then grip motion to create focused friction. Third, the paddle head must follow an outside arc trajectory to execute a good backhand rip. Let's now talk about the forehand loop against backspin. This is a difficult skill that separates amateur player levels. I hope all you players will take practicing against backspin seriously. There are 3 ways to practice this. First, use a ball machine. Second, find a partner who can do multi-ball feeding, or if not, have them push balls to you. Third, practice against a long pips player, because their balls are heavy and don't bounce forward, making it easier to loop continuously. Everyone should use these 3 methods to practice against backspin, because in the future, your ability to handle backspin will be what defines your competitive level. 3 key points for looping backspin. First, you must lower your center of gravity. If you can't get your center of gravity down, you will never loop backspin well. To lower your center of gravity, remember, don't straighten your knees, keep them bent. Don't stick your hips out. Sink them. Don't raise your shoulders. Keep them down. Do these 3 things well, and your backspin loop will be fine. The feeling should be that your opponent can never see your paddle. It should be hidden below the table. If they can see it, you're doing it wrong. Your backswing must always be below the table, always lower than the ball. Only then can you loop backspin well. When your center of gravity is low, you can lift the ball even without much body rotation. But if your center of gravity is high, no amount of rotation will help, because the difference in spin force between hitting behind the ball versus under it is huge. Second point, within the backspin system, you must learn true friction. Friction is the key to handling situations in a match like wide-angle pushes to your forehand, short balls, or when you can't read the spin. It's easy to understand, a normal drive hits a single point on the ball, whereas friction is making contact from one point to another, creating a surface. You need to find a way to make contact with the ball over a slightly larger area. For example, brushing from the 2 o'clock position to 1:30 or 12:30. That's friction. A normal drive just makes contact at 2 o'clock and that's it. To create friction, your fingers must guide the paddle in an outside arc, a parabolic path. The moment your fingers make that move, you'll naturally get the feeling of wrapping the ball. That's the one thing we're missing for good friction. So, your fingers need to learn to create this arcing motion, and the feeling of friction on both your forehand and backhand will emerge. Your fingers must learn to guide the paddle face to wrap the ball, creating a curved angle of friction. And the faster the frequency, the more spin. A slow motion creates friction but not much spin. A fast motion creates strong friction, and the ball becomes very spinny. Your loop doesn't need power. With enough spin, your opponent won't be able to block it, and it will be consistent. Third point, for the forehand loop against backspin, you must learn to use your body for power. Even if your arm doesn't move much, you can lift the arc with your body. You can loop it up in critical moments. So for backspin balls, the role of the body is much more important than the arm. The key for the arm is friction, while the body helps the arm generate power and create the arc. Your body must learn to sink down, drive forward, and push up. You need all these movements. You can't just push up, you must also drive forward. This way, you can use your body to create the arc when you're under pressure. When you want to generate power, create it with your body. My arm only uses 50% of its strength, because using too much arm power leads to errors. The body, however, can control your error rate. Even if you use your body with maximum effort, as long as you control the power in your arm, the ball won't go out. So, real power for the forehand loop against backspin comes from the body's power transfer. Your arm should always stay at 50% to 60% effort. Let your body swing the momentum out, and use your hand to control the force. Then you'll be able to land the shot. If you only use your arm without your body, sometimes you'll make it, sometimes you won't. Anyone can generate power, but how to generate power and land the ball on the table, that's the key for amateur players. You have to use the power from your legs, hips, and shoulders. With your arm controlling at 50% power, the ball will already be explosive. In a match, you'll be able to land your shots and win points. Now, let's move to the backhand loop against backspin. For 99% of amateurs with a weak backhand, the problem is with the paddle head. When looping with your backhand, the paddle head must point to the 7 o'clock position. The reason my backhand is so effortless and I can generate power against backspin is because my paddle head points to 7 o'clock during the backswing. It uses the momentum of the paddle head to whip the ball up. But if your paddle head is vertical, even if you try to brush upwards, you won't generate enough friction, and the ball will fall into the net. So the paddle head must point to 7 o'clock. Once it's pointing at 7 o'clock, the moment you rotate the paddle head, the backspin is broken. This is one of the secrets to my good backhand loop. Most players have a vertical paddle face for their backhand drive. When they try to loop backspin, they just drop their hand but don't change the paddle angle. That is still a backhand drive motion. Second, the key to my backhand is that I always lift first, then press down. Right now, you are all using a fixed paddle face and angle to loop the ball. But my motion is very subtle. After the backswing and forward swing, there is always a final downward pressing motion. For example, on a power loop, if I just swing upwards, the ball will fly off the table. So, there must be a downward pressing motion. We usually only have an upward motion, which leads to an awkward situation: loop softly and it hits the net, loop hard and it goes out of bounds. So your backhand feeling must include this process of lifting up and then pressing down. But you must apply enough force before you press, otherwise pressing too early will also hit the net. So, when practicing a high spin loop, just lift upwards and hold it at the peak of your swing. For a high spin loop, lift upwards. When you want a power loop, add a downward press on top of that. This achieves lift for spin, press for power. Lift for spin, press for power. That's all there is to it. These are two mechanical systems. Because the backhand's inward-outward motion requires the highest level of arc control, unlike the forehand arc which comes back towards the body. The backhand arc goes outwards, so you must learn to support and brush the ball on the way up. And then press down after lifting to control the arc, or it will go out. Third point, for a good backhand, you also need an outside arc. For the same loop, a straight forward motion versus one with a slight outside arc, the latter will have much more spin. A method I've devised for you is to start by practicing the backhand banana flick. Because the banana flick is over the table and in front of you, you can see very clearly whether you are making an outside arc or just going straight. I have a case study for this. After I taught a child the backhand flick, his backhand loop against backspin became incredibly good, because he found the feeling of the outside arc through the flick, so the quality naturally improved. When doing the flick in front of your body, feel the outside arc of the paddle head. Then, move this backswing position to 7 o'clock, and follow the same trajectory as your flick. You'll get it immediately. Set your backswing at 7 o'clock, continue with the flicking motion, find that feeling, then add some speed. That is your backhand power loop. Start with the flick to find the feeling of the arc in your backhand swing. Then, change the backswing position, enlarge the motion, and that's the essence of the backhand loop. If you want a good backhand, follow these key points I've explained. Looping backspin on both forehand and backhand is the dividing line between skill levels. If your ability against backspin is strong, your level will improve, and you'll be unbeatable against pips out players.